If there is no self, who is experiencing this life? Chapter 1. That I feeling and the core question. There's something so familiar, so constant, that we rarely stop to question it. It's the deep, unshakable sense that I am here. We don't have to create it. It's just there, quietly present in everything we do. When we wake up in the morning, it's the first thing we know. When we feel pain, hear someone call our name, or look up at the sky, it's there. This silent but certain feeling of being a me, the one at the center of experience. That's why when we first hear about the Buddhist teaching of no self, it can be unsettling. If there is no self, then who is feeling all of this? Who is experiencing this life? This isn't just an abstract idea. It feels deeply personal. Whatever this I is, it seems to be the one thing we can always trust, the one thing that is closest to us. Instead of ignoring or rejecting this question, Buddhism invites us to look at it carefully. What exactly is this feeling of I? Is it as real and solid as it seems? Or could it be something different from what we assume? To explore this, Buddhism makes an important distinction between two kinds of truth. Conventional truth is the everyday reality we live in. We use words like I and you all the time. We say things like, I am hungry, I love music, or this is my body. This way of speaking is necessary. It helps us function and communicate. Buddhism does not deny this. Ultimate truth looks deeper. It asks, when we say I, what exactly are we pointing to? Is there a real, unchanging self inside us that is separate from everything else? Is there a me that remains the same from childhood to old age? These are not just philosophical riddles. They challenge something we take for granted. After all, what seems obvious isn't always true. A mirage looks like water, but when we get closer, we realize it isn't. Similarly, the sense of I feels like something solid, but when we examine it, we might discover something unexpected. This exploration does not begin with complex theories. It starts with something simpler, paying attention to our own experience. Notice how natural it feels to say, I am thinking, or I am making a decision. Notice how deeply attached we are to this sense of I. And also notice, without fear, how uncomfortable it can be to question it. But the real question is not, do we exist? Of course we exist. We live, we think, we feel. The deeper question is, do we exist in the way we assume? Is there something inside us that is permanent, separate, and fully in control? Many people misunderstand this teaching. They hear no self and think Buddhism is saying we don't exist at all. But that's not the case. This teaching is not about taking something away. It's about revealing something deeper, something more free, more peaceful. But to see it, we first have to question what we think we already know. So we begin here, with awareness, with curiosity. There's no need to rush to an answer, no need to force a belief. Just observe. What is this I really? Where is it? Is it the body, the brain, the thoughts, the emotions? When we look closely, not with stress, but with genuine curiosity, we may notice something surprising. The I is not as solid as it feels. It shifts, changes, and never stays the same. When we try to catch it, it slips away like water through our fingers. Buddhism doesn't ask us to accept this blindly. It simply invites us to pay attention, to watch moment by moment, to let our own experience show us what is real. And so, we start, not with conclusions, but with the simplest, most honest question we can ask. Who is this? Then, with quiet attention, we watch. Not searching for a quick answer, but simply seeing what is actually happening, one moment at a time. Chapter 2. What kind of self are we talking about? Most people, when they hear that Buddhism teaches no self, assume it means they don't exist, that their thoughts, memories, and experiences aren't real. But that's not what's being questioned. Buddhism isn't denying your everyday sense of being a person. It's pointing to something deeper, the hidden belief that behind all your changing thoughts, emotions, and experiences, there is a fixed, unchanging me. It's not about your name, your habits, or the roles you play in life. No one denies those. What Buddhism asks us to examine is the quiet but powerful idea that beneath all these shifting details, there is something permanent, a kind of hidden owner or controller that has always been the same. Imagine someone holding an old gold coin. Over time, it gets scratched and worn, but they believe that underneath, the coin itself is still pure and untouched. That's how people think about the self, something steady beneath all change. But is that actually true? To explore this, we need to look at 3 common assumptions about the self. The first is that it is permanent, that there is a true me that hasn't changed since childhood. But take a quiet moment. Are you really the same as when you were a child? Your thoughts, emotions, and views on life, have they stayed exactly the same? Probably not. If everything that makes you you is constantly changing, what part is truly permanent? The second assumption is that the self is independent, that it controls thoughts, emotions, and actions. But if you look closely, is that really the case? When emotions like anger or sadness appear, did you choose them? Did you decide to have certain thoughts? Most of the time, they just arise. If there were a self in full control, wouldn't things work differently? The third assumption is that the self is one single thing. But aren't there many versions of you? The you at work, the you with family, the you when you're alone. Some days you feel confident, other days, uncertain. Your thoughts contradict each other. Your emotions shift. If the self were truly one, wouldn't it always feel the same? People hold on to the idea of a fixed self because it feels safe. It gives the illusion of control, the belief that someone is managing life. That's why the idea of no self can feel unsettling. But Buddhism isn't saying that you don't matter. It's questioning whether this fixed, separate self is really there in the way we assume. And this is where things start to shift. If this permanent, independent self isn't actually there, then maybe we don't need to hold on to it so tightly. Maybe we don't need to defend it, protect it, or be afraid of losing it. What we discover instead is something much more alive, something flexible, interconnected, and always changing. That's why it's so important to be clear on what kind of self is being questioned. Buddhism is not asking us to erase our personality or to stop being human. It's inviting us to look with fresh eyes at something we've always taken for granted and to see if it really holds up. Because only when we clearly see what we've been holding on to can we begin to let it go, not as a loss, but as a kind of freedom. Chapter 3. How does experience actually happen? Now that we understand what kind of self we're questioning, that fixed, permanent, independent core, let's turn our attention to a crucial question. If that kind of self might not exist, then what is happening when we experience life? If there's no central I driving the process, how does everything still function so smoothly? Let's break this down step by step. In this very moment, you're hearing these words. Perhaps you're aware of your body sitting or standing. Maybe you notice a sound in the background, or a thought passing by. These are all experiences. But how do they arise? It begins with contact. Our body has senses, eyes, ears, skin, nose, tongue, that meet the outside world. You see light and shapes with your eyes. You hear sounds with your ears. You feel warmth or pressure with your skin. And inside, your mind becomes aware of thoughts and feelings. This meeting between the senses and the world creates awareness. This is the first step of experience. But that's just the start. Next, a feeling tone arises. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This response is automatic. If you hear a beautiful sound, it feels pleasant. If there's a loud noise, it feels unpleasant. If something passes by unnoticed, it feels neutral. This feeling tone follows immediately after contact, often so quickly that we don't even notice it. Then, the mind steps in to recognize and label what's happening. That's a dog barking. That's the smell of coffee. I'm feeling anxious. This recognition is shaped by memory, language, and past experiences. Without this, we'd be lost in raw sensations. But with it, the world starts to make sense, and the experience becomes something we can identify. Next, our mental habits and intentions begin to respond. Based on how we label things and how we feel about them, we begin to move, internally or externally. We react. We want more of the pleasant. We want to avoid the unpleasant. And we're confused by the neutral. These intentions shape our actions, thoughts, speech, movements. The mind doesn't just perceive, it wants, resists, plans, and remembers. This cycle constantly influences what happens next. Through this entire process, awareness flows gently through it all. It doesn't control the process, but it notices what's happening. It's like light illuminating a stage, not the actor performing. This awareness is how we begin to understand experience, not by grasping it or stopping it, but by calmly observing it as it unfolds. If we look closely at how we experience life, we begin to see that it's a dynamic process. There isn't a fixed self inside making it all happen. It's a system, with sense organs, feelings, thoughts, and actions all interacting together. It's not a solid entity having experiences. It's the unfolding of interconnected parts working together. And here's the key. This process doesn't need a fixed, permanent self to keep going. In fact, it runs more smoothly when we stop clinging to that idea. Why? Because the belief in a solid, unchanging I often leads to confusion. It makes us ask questions like, why am I like this? Or, why did this happen to me? These questions, though natural, often lead to stress, regret, or blame. But when we begin to see life as a natural unfolding, a process rather than something happening to a fixed self, we can soften. We stop taking things so personally. This doesn't mean we become passive. It means we become wise. We start to notice how things arise: the contact, the feeling, the recognition, the reaction. Instead of blaming ourselves or others for being human, we learn to engage with life more skillfully and peacefully. So instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" when you feel angry or joyful, you can ask, "What's happening in this moment? What conditions led to this feeling? What's the contact, the tone, the reaction?" By gently investigating, we begin to see the pattern, and the more we observe, the less tightly we hold on to the illusion of a fixed I. In the end, we realize something surprising. Life is not happening to a fixed self. It is simply unfolding through the process of body, mind, and world meeting and interacting. When we observe this, truly look at it, we see that we don't need to chase the illusion of a hidden controller. We just live, awake, present, and free to respond with wisdom. Chapter 4. What keeps this process going? Once we begin to see experience not as something a solid me is having, but as a stream of events arising and passing based on causes and conditions, a new question appears naturally. If it's just a process, why does it feel so continuous, so personal? Why does life seem like a movie starring me, directed by me, and mostly about me? The answer lies in momentum, like a river that flows because of all the drops of water behind it. Our moment-to-moment experience flows because of all the forces that came before: thoughts, actions, habits, choices, intentions. Even if there's no unchanging self steering the boat still moves because the current carries it forward. And where does that current come from? It comes from what Buddhism calls conditions. Nothing in our experience arises randomly or independently. Everything depends on something else. When you feel joy, there's a cause for it. When you feel pain, there's a cause for that too. When a thought appears, it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from memory, mood, attention, intention, sensory input, and more. This is not some mysterious idea. We can observe it directly. For example, imagine you hear your name spoken across the room. Even if you're distracted, your attention jumps immediately. Why? Because over time, your brain has been trained to treat that sound as important. That's the power of conditioned patterns. Now imagine how many such patterns you've built up over a lifetime. In how you respond to praise, criticism, stress, desire, fear. So the flow of experience keeps moving, not because you push it forward, but because of the energy of these habits, shaped by your past actions, especially actions done with intention and craving. These form what we can call your personal momentum. Like a ball rolling down a hill, each action adds speed and direction. Some patterns are healthy, others are painful. But they all shape what you're likely to feel, think, or do next. But that's not the whole story. To understand what really fuels this ongoing process, we need to look deeper. Underneath our daily thoughts and choices, there is something more subtle, a kind of fuel that keeps the fire burning. In Buddhism, it's described as tanha, which means craving, thirst, wanting. It's not just desire for things, it's the deep pull inside us that always wants something different. We want pleasure, we want security, we want things to last, We want to escape discomfort. We want to fix things, hold on, control. This craving shows up in 1,000 forms, from simple habits like checking your phone to deeper patterns like needing to be loved, needing to be right, needing to feel safe. And paired with this craving is something even more fundamental: not seeing clearly. A kind of basic confusion or misunderstanding about who we are, what life is, and how things truly work. It's this combination, craving and confusion, that keeps the process going. Like a fire needs fuel and oxygen, our inner machinery runs on these two forces. They push us to act, to react, to cling, to avoid, to repeat the same cycles. And because we don't fully understand the nature of this machinery, we keep mistaking it for me. But here's the powerful truth. This cycle is not a prison. It's a process. And that means it can change. The momentum may be strong, but it's not permanent. The fuel may be burning, but it can run out. Each time we act with more awareness and less craving, we shift the current slightly. Each time we observe instead of react, we interrupt the momentum. Each time we see clearly, we weaken the misunderstanding at the root. This is why practice matters. Meditation, mindfulness, ethical living, they're not about being spiritual in some abstract way. They're about slowing down the machinery enough to see it clearly, to understand the causes behind our experience, to begin turning the wheel in a wiser direction. And over time, something remarkable happens. We stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What conditions are creating this?" We stop blaming or clinging and start observing. We begin to taste a freedom that doesn't come from controlling life, but from understanding it deeply, honestly, patiently. In this way, we move one step closer to answering the big question, not with a theory, but with our own clear seeing. If no solid self is behind the wheel, then what's really happening? The answer is not hidden. It's unfolding in real time, right here, in every breath and every moment of awareness.